What is going on, friends and fellow artists? This is Matt, aka Mr. E in 3D. And guys, in today's video, we are going to go in and I'm going to try to create a couple different variations of hair using different techniques that I know. And hopefully I can get something a little bit better, something that matches this character a little bit more than the current model here. If you've been following along in the last video, I did share this is just a mock-up, a placeholder that I imported into this file just to see how it would look overall. I do like it. I like the idea of the spiky kind of hair going in all different directions, but I definitely think I can improve it. Now this is video 2 of the series where I am trying to create Nightcrawler from the X-Men. In between, I have done a couple modifications. Here you can see I evened out the eyebrows a little bit, brought them down, kind of softened them up a little bit. They were a little bit pointy before. Made some improvements in the nose, brought the nose down, shaped it up a little bit better. I actually added nostrils, which I don't typically do for this character style, but I do like it, so I'll probably do this moving forward actually. Did a little bit of shaping around the mouth, just fixed that up a little bit, straightened out his teeth. Did just some overall cleanup of lines around the face, smoothing things out. I actually did adjust the chin and the jaw a little bit, brought them up. Overall, I'm very happy with him. He does look like Nightcrawler, and it's also in my character style, which is the overall challenge that I've put myself in. So without further ado, guys, let's go ahead and get started. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move this out of the way. And we're going to go straight into the head model that we were working on in our last video. I'm going to come up here to edit. And what I want to do is I want to grab a model of the scalp, the hairline. So I'm going to go hit B for box select, and I'm going to grab all of these faces. And you can see here I do have a line that I added in. I actually did that while I was modeling his head. A little bit of forward thinking there because I knew I was going to be doing this practice next. So once I have all of my faces selected, I'm going to hit Shift D to duplicate, click off. And then I'm going to GZ and grab that duplication and pull it off of the regular model. Now what I'm going to do for here is I'm going to hit P to separate the selection. And what that basically does is that creates a completely separate model from the head. I want to do all of my modeling of the hair in a completely different model than the head. And there's a few reasons for this. Essentially, this gives me the freedom to do different techniques, try different things out without affecting the head itself. So I don't lose any work if I mess around here. And if I don't like what I do, it's fine. I can delete it. I can create another scalp and I can just keep going. From here, let's go into this model, object, edit. And what we're going to do is we're going to hit A to select all, E to extrude, click off, and then S to scale it out. Okay, now you can see here, there's a couple faces from that first level that are shown through. You want to get rid of that. So I'm going to hit SX, spread out a little bit, GZ. We just want to do what we can to get rid of those lines. Okay, we want to make sure this is nice and three-dimensional in its own right. Perfect. Now from here, I have a completely different working surface and I don't have to worry about this. I'm going to GZ and bring it back down over my model. And you can see it kind of looks like a silly, like a toupee. Don't worry, we're going to fix that. We're going to make it look cool here in a couple minutes. All right, the first technique that I'm going to show you guys is this spiky look, how I get that, because it may actually be something that works for you during your projects. And there's definitely some merit to it. I do like the style and I've used it before. But I'm going to show you guys that, and then from there we'll try out a couple others. Now the key to this first technique is the subdivision surface. We want to make sure that we apply this, and this is actually going to be the key in order for us to get those spikes created. Now I'm going to bring this down to a 2, and then I'm going to go ahead and click this down arrow and I'm going to apply it. Okay, and when we go into edit, you will now see we have all these vertices to work with. Now you could apply the mirror as well, but we don't have to, and it'll save us a lot of time if we don't out the gate. Once we have all of our spikes created, we can go ahead back in, apply that mirror and move them however we want. But essentially the technique is going to be the same as I do when I create fur lining for boots or capes and fur on animals as well. what I'm going to do is I'm going to click a vertex, and I'm going to count around it at least one square. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, ultimately, I would honestly recommend a little bit more than this. I would maybe even bring it out one more, but that square is a good guideline to get started. And once you grab that vertex, we're just going to bring it straight up and create a spike. Now again, we can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and grab this one. But instead, let's grab this one. And I'll show you why here in a couple seconds. Grab this one. And we are going to go through and just create those spikes. I will recommend you don't do too much in the middle until you have that mirror created, because it will look a little bit too uniform if you just have a row of spikes down the middle. Almost looks like a mohawk. But as we go through and we make sure we have at least that box selected, we can actually grab randoms and pull loose. And this is pretty much all we do around the head. We just make sure we grab those spikes. Now, I am going to do a couple over here so I can show you guys why I do recommend a little bit more than that square. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's do this one because it's right next to it. Grab those, pull them out, and you can see here, okay, cool, I got my 2 unique spikes, and that's great. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back and I'm going to subdivide this, because that's the next step. I'm going to create another subdivision surface. And I'll bring that up by 2. And then you can see it actually does this little like connection here. Now we're going to go ahead and grab these. We obviously want these to be a little bit more spiky. The subdivision definitely takes these down. Much shorter. But I just personally feel that the divide between when you go a little bit more is just better than when you bring them right up next to each other, because then you get that big U shape that I just don't really like that all that much. And you will see that in the mock-up version. If you look closely enough, you can see that quite a bit in that version of the mock-up of the hair, which is another reason why I didn't really want to use that one. But that's it, guys. This is literally the technique. You just go around, make sure you have at least that square, maybe a little more, and you pull the spikes out. And if you want it to be wild, you can just pull them in random directions. You can apply the mirror and then move them in all different directions, or you can push them to one side or the other, depending on the technique that you want to use. And I do like this technique for some characters. It does work great for anime type characters. I think it looks really cool. It's just for Nightcrawler, I just think I want something a little bit more detailed. Now, the one last thing I want to mention, you may be tempted to come in here and just get, well, I'm just going to grab a whole line and just go every other guy. And grab every other vertex and grab and pull down. You can certainly do this. I find personally that this just looks way too uniform to be hair. It does actually create a really cool scaling effect if you're looking to create some really cool lizard scales or dragon scales or something. But for hair, it just doesn't look right. But guys, that is the first technique. That is the spike technique. Looks pretty cool, but I think we can do better. All right, guys, now for this technique, we are actually going to switch it up, and instead of committing our subdivision, we are actually going to commit our mirror. And the same principle, we don't want to commit the mirror here until we are ready to pose and we are 100% sure that our model is complete. Because if we had to commit the mirror here, any change that we want to make to the left, we would have to manually do to the right, and it's just a pain. But in this version, we are actually going to do most of our modeling and most of our changes here before we even start adding the lines. We're basically going to create a form for the hair, how we want it to look. Now I call this the line technique, or just basically I call this line hair creation. Don't really have like a full name for it, but essentially what we are going to do is we are going to be adding lines and loop cuts, and then we are going to be pulling them just like we were pulling spikes in the last version. I'll show you what I mean. So from here, we're going to try and give them kind of like a waving, like kind of like a wavy comb back hairstyle. So what we're gonna do is from here, we're just gonna go hit Control R, create a couple loop cuts. We're gonna do that for each of these sections. We're gonna divide this down. And I know it's gonna turn boxy as we go. I always talk about this in other videos. Don't worry about that right now, because as we go through, we're going to pull those apart and it's actually gonna remove that boxy look for the most part. All right, so what we're gonna do from here is we're just going to grab these lines, okay? And just like when we were doing the spike technique and we were grabbing one and then leaving a box around it, this time we're just going to make sure that we have a line between, okay? So it's going to be every other series of lines. Let's make sure we grab that one. This one. This one. And then once we have a group done, we're not going to grab along any specific direction. We're just going to hit G and pull it up. Okay, and we're going to create that division. And then what we can also do is GY, and we can pull that forward a little bit. And we're just going to get that wave in our hair. Now this doesn't work necessarily for everyone. It does tend to work a lot better for longer hair. And I will use this technique primarily for any of my characters that have long hair, just because it's easier. But in this situation, it probably isn't going to work too well. I do think I'm going to use another technique, or maybe a combination of a couple of techniques. But you guys get the idea. Again, just grabbing every other line, and we don't have to grab top to bottom. Doesn't necessarily have to be every other line either. Just gonna grab those. Might be a little bit too much space there. And that is one thing too. If you are out here in the front and you want to add just even a little bit more definition here, you can certainly do that by adding loop cuts to each of these waves. Let's grab you and you. I'm not going to do the entire head of hair. Again, just giving you guys an example of what it looks like. But there you go. Of course, you can spend a lot more time on this, and maybe I'll do a mock-up version of this where it's a little bit nicer so you guys can see the full effect. But that is essentially how you would get it. It would be very, very basic, just showing a change. Obviously, it's not too smooth. It does look perfectly fine when you put the work in and go through and make all of those changes. I'm just basically showing you guys the basis for the technique. It may work for your models, just like the spikes might work. For this particular project, I'm going to try something else, I think, but that would be the second technique. All right, guys, so the third and final technique I want to show you is a more manual way of doing it. Probably one of my favorites, though. It's time-consuming, a lot of work, but you definitely get the best results, and I think we're going to use some form of this for our Nightcrawler. The only thing that you want to do as far as your modifiers over here, you want to go ahead and apply that mirror. Now you could leave the mirror unapplied, and you could essentially go in and pull out all of your waves or spikes or whatever, but they're going to mirror over here, and then you're going to have to manually go in and try and change them. And it's just a lot of work that probably more work than just doing it all at once. So here we go. We have our scalp mold, I'm going to go ahead, and what I'm essentially going to do is I'm literally going to use my knife utility and just start cutting out my waves. And so for Kurt, again, he's going to have that wild hair. We're going to do some crazy spikes. We don't want these to be too big. We do want them going all over his head though, and we are literally going to fill his head with these spikes. Okay, now you're probably thinking that's a little crazy. I guarantee you it's actually really, really cool looking though once we actually get it done. Again, you don't want to go too big because this is supposed to be hair. We are going to smooth out this hair. Then I'm going to add some lines to the front as well to make it look even cooler. And again, I'm not going to do the full head. I'm just going to show you guys the principle. Then you want to just keep going. And you just want to have these waves of hair, one right after another, on the surface. And I guess I'll just do the front so I can show you guys. But essentially you would cover the entire scalp with this. And you know, if you were doing, let's say we're not going our hair straight back, let's say we're doing somebody with like the hair combed over to the side, you could absolutely do that. You would just start here and just drawing these little spikies over. It's just a really, really cool method. It kind of still gives you that anime-ish look without just having straight spikes. And if you've been following along with my other videos, you are probably saying, Matt, you preach against using the knife utility so much, and yet I see you using it all the time. I don't dislike the knife utility. I just like to let people know that when they start using it, you can't easily go back to loop cuts. So this is probably enough for us to get some good stuff. So what I'm basically going to do is, and again, you would do the entire head. You would draw out the entire head before you did this process. But you're basically going to go every other one, just like we did with the lines. Skip this one, do this one. And you can't do every one, because if you do every one, it's just going to come out as one giant blob. That's why you've got to separate them. And you, and then let's grab you. All right, and we're just going to E and pull them out. And let's go ahead and pull them forward a little bit and down. Okay, you can't really see it yet. I promise you we'll see something in the next couple minutes. Go back in, grab the next group. Just make sure you're grabbing all of the faces too, because it can be tricky when you have these tiny little bits of triangle that are left. Make sure you're grabbing those. Like that. And then E those. A tiny little sliver of triangle. Grab all that. Angle that a little bit, and then you're just going to go back and grab this one. Grab the next layer back. And you have these little pinches. They do disappear once you actually get the other faces extruded. But once you get those done, you come out, you can see this actually does a really cool job. And you know, you want to go in and maybe grab like this one and grab it out some more. And just grab them out a little bit more manually. When we're done, because this front does look a little weird, a couple ways you can fix that, and I want to show you guys that. This essentially gives you guys an idea of what I'm talking about. It's wild, it's crazy, and you're gonna have a little bit of stuff happening here. You can fix that, it's not a big deal. Just grab this one and pull it out. But then you just go over, once you're completely done with the model, you go over it and you look and you see where you can find different places where maybe, you know, like this one might be need to get pulled out a little bit to the right or left, so on and so forth. And then once you are done, you can actually go ahead and apply this. You don't want to apply it at 2, okay? Or I'm sorry, you don't want to apply it at 4, you want to apply it at 2 maybe. What you can then do is go back in, same as we did with our spiky technique. We're going to grab end the line. We're going to grab a couple of these lines, every other one. Make sure you grab the bottom as well. That's probably the most important part, honestly. And let's just grab a couple of these. Every other one. I'm gonna grab, and then we're gonna subdivide again. Now, subdivision does depend a lot on your computer and what your computer can handle. My computer is older and I can still do this. Once we get that done, you can see it adds yet a whole other layer of depth to the hair. So this is actually what we're going to probably be trying to do, guys. This is probably the technique I'm going to use. I'm obviously not going to sit here and have you guys watch the entire process. I'm going to go ahead and try to form out a version of this, and I will be back probably in a little bit with a finalized version that you guys can see for yourselves. All right, guys, so as we conclude, I wanted to show you all 3 techniques in a final version so you could get to see them. First is the spiky version. This is the original mockup that I imported into the file. Again, I think it looks perfectly fine, just not as detailed as I would like. This is a final version of the line technique that I use. Again, I like it a lot, just not as detailed as it could be. And lastly, we have the knife and extrusion technique where I cut out each individual wave and then I detail them out individually. Now, all 3 of these are great. This is definitely the most time consuming. And during the video, I did say that this was probably going to be the technique that I was going to use. However, I did go back in and I tried one more time using all 3 techniques together. And I gotta say, this is probably what I'm gonna go with. This is another version that I created using all 3 techniques together. So I drew the lines in, I then drew spikes out from the lines, and I even used a little bit of knife work to get some extra details around the back. This honestly is exactly what I was looking for when I started the project. I wanted to have that crazy hair. I do want it to have kind of like a cartoony, spikish look. It perfectly matches the line technique of other characters that I use, and I really, really think that this is exactly what I've been looking for. So guys, moving forward, you will see this in the videos. Next up, we will be creating his body, and followed by that, we will go ahead and create the final video of the project where I will pose him and I will print him and show you guys the final product. Now, as always, guys, thank you all so much for the support that I am seeing in the channel. Please like, share, subscribe, comment. Let me know which version of the hair you guys actually like the best. If it's not this one, that's perfectly fine. All opinions are valid. But guys, thank you again so much. Have a great day.